All right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. Today is Tuesday, December 3rd of 2024. And looking ahead here, we have a 10-game NHL slate as well as an 8-game NBA main slate. So it should be a fun day of DFS. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS related questions. Get your questions in one of three ways here. First off, send us an email, support@sabersim.com. Second, post it live in the YouTube chat. Third way, post it in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord and want to get access to that channel, there is a link in the description of this video. You also get access to our similar channels, individual sport channels, and you get access to the rest of the SaberSim team. So can't say enough good things about the Discord. But with that said, we do this show Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, and we do this show on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. So tune in any one of those days and get your questions answered. But appreciate you guys tuning in. As always here, let's get SaberSim pulled up, and we will jump into questions that are rolling in here. So let's see. We got SaberSim up. Boom. And let's go to the home screen here. We have some questions in the YouTube chat here as well. We have some questions in the office hours channel. So we will just hit these from high to low. No problem about that. Let me get some of these Discord ones in here, and we'll start knocking through these. See, Easy asked for the builder review show. Next one will be on Friday, but I will note you down and get you added to the list for that show. Should be the first one up on Friday. All right. So top down here, Sean, a little out of order, but no worries. Sean said, hi, question today for when it starts on my SaberSim settings. I always ask it to give me 3 lineups with certain exposures, settings, etc. Or sometimes it's ranked with a higher number, for example, like rank 19. Whenever I get a rank outside of rank 3, it always seems to be a unique lineup that does very well and sometimes gives me a top 5 placement. Or is there a way to have the settings give me that more often instead of rank 3? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I understand this question. So basically what happens here is, let's say that you put in some exposure adjustments up front, right? So let's say I'm going to do 10% Luka. Maybe I'm going to do, 10% Scotty. So let's say I do something like this, right? Okay, great. I make some adjustments here. I build some lineups, right? So 2 things happen when you do the exposures up front. Number 1, Builder takes that into account as it builds the lineup. So it's saying, hey, out of these 500 lineups that I'm generating, I need to make sure my pool exposures are at least 10% to each of these players. Okay, that's the first thing that happens. Second thing that happens is the lineups get built, lineups get put into the build here. And then now you have your my lineups number, which is 20. So then this is the second part. The builder says, hey, well, first I needed to have 10% of each of these players in my 500. Now I need to make sure that I have 10% of these players in my top 20, right? Now that doesn't mean that the top 20 lineups are going to have those players. But what it means is that the 20 lineups that you're viewing are going to meet those exposures. So for instance, when you set this to 3, right, the builder still needs to meet that 10% to the players that we've set here, which was Barnes, Maxey, and Luka. But one thing you'll see here, right, is that, okay, lineup 1, lineup 2, and then lineup 89. So the builder had to go down to lineup 89 to meet those 3 exposure requests. So just because you put the exposure up front doesn't mean that the builder is going to give you the top 3 lineups that meet those exposures, right? Because the exposures up front go to the pool, and then the lineups get graded based on whatever sorting metric you're grading. And then from the sorting metric, after, that reordering takes place, then your exposures get applied. So this is why you won't always see lineups 1, 2, and 3 if you're using exposures, because it is making sure it meets your request. So, if you're putting in exposure requests and you're getting, lineups of 1, 2, and 12, and lineup 12 is doing good, then hey, that probably means that you're making good decisions when it comes to which players you are deciding you want to get into your lineups. So I would say keep doing what you're doing. I think it's cool. I don't see anything wrong with that right off the bat here. So those would be my opinions there. All right, gonna keep rolling here, top down. Dante said, is RAROI still available on new SaberSim? Because I don't see it, or what has it been replaced by? Good question. So we removed RAROI, I think in like August, based on some updates to the contest sim metrics that we made. So basically, when we first released contest sims, there was no RAROI. The reason we created it after the fact was due to lineups being very, very leveraged and just the way that the contest sim was set up. So we wanted to create something that was a little bit safer. So we went with RAROI. Well, in about August here, we made an update to basically help the contest sim understand that each of your lineups typically isn't going into the contest individually, right? Like, let's say where you have a 20 max contest. Well, your 20 lineups are fighting for equity against each other too. The old way the contest sims were set up, it wasn't doing that. But now the new way the contest sims are set up, it does take that into account, which is why RAROI is no longer as important as it used to be. So you can see this if you go and create any contest sim, a manual one, you're going to see this user entries option here. And this says, the little tooltip here, it describes the simulated number of user entries in the contest. If set to 1, each lineup will be simmed independently against the field. If greater than 1, the sim will treat all of your lineups as a portfolio to reduce self-competitiveness. See, this is what we added that basically took the replaced the usefulness of RAROI. So now we are accounting for self-competitiveness. We are accounting for lineups fighting for equity against each other from your set of lineups. And so now we recommend users just use ROI. All right. Next question. When using rank versus unique rank with an ROI autofill, what's the difference? Good question. So what rank does is it allows a lineup to be used in more than one entry. So let's say that, this graded out well for the 150 max, which is the top contest here. Well, let's say that one of those 150 lineups also grades out well for the 3 max right beneath it. If you use rank, the one lineup in question can go into both contests. If you use unique rank, the lineup can only be used once. So what would happen is it would go into the top contest, however they are ordered. It goes top down. And once it's used, it gets removed from the effective pool of lineups for future contests below it. So that well-ranked lineup would not go into the 3 max beneath it. So that's the difference between rank and unique rank. How does SaberSim take into account when teams are on a back-to-back and if the coaches will sit their starters early? This is a good question. I would say SaberSim doesn't take this into account. This is kind of a hard thing to predict. I'm like pretty in tune with NBA and like, okay, this team's like on like the first leg of a back-to-back. This team's on like the second leg. And, this is like how things are shaping up. It is a little bit higher variance than you might think. Like one day you might see like, Trae Young played like 37 minutes. I think he's going to play like less. And then he plays, another 37 minutes. And it's like, okay, well, but then you might see something, right, where like a team is on like a first leg of a back-to-back and then they get out to a lead. And then all of a sudden, like they sit all their starters and they're like, oh, okay, now everybody's going to be rested for like tomorrow. Right. So it gets pretty weird. sometimes, you know, like let's say like OKC is on like a back-to-back tomorrow, right? Like today's game 1, you see that like OKC is in like a, this is something I'll look at is like the spreads of the games. So like when you can combine spreads with back-to-back frequency, I think like maybe there is some signal there where it's like, okay, you know, OKC favored by 13. They're on the first leg of a back-to-back. You know, if they get out to a lead, it is probably a little bit likely that, you know, Shai sits, Jalen Williams sits, right? Some of these bigger name players on the team. You know, how do you account for that? It's a little bit hard. I think if you're going to do something like that, what you could just do, what I would probably do is just give them like a 1-point projection decrease or lower their minutes, you know, 1 to 2 minutes or something like that. So like it would simply be coming in here and like, okay, hey, I'm just going to lower Shai like a little bit. And then maybe I like lower Jalen a little bit too, to try and account for that. Now, what happens if the game ends up being close? You know, then you're wrong, right? And that's like the risk that you're taking. So things like that can happen. You know, maybe like Cleveland's another good example tonight with like Cleveland and Washington with, you know, looks like a 15, 16 point spread here. And what if, you know, Cleveland's on a second leg of a back-to-back, you know, might be more likely to sit here, right? What were the minutes yesterday? How did everyone do? I think Cleveland's like last game was like a blowout where starters might not have played that much. I could be wrong. I could be misremembering that, but those are the things that you want to be looking at. But just to come full circle here, SaberSim is not doing anything to take into account if teams are on back-to-backs naturally here. And I would say making some adjustment here would be a value add to the sim more than anything. All right. If I'm not going to max enter a contest, what is the best way to stick with the field to potentially take down the contest? So what I always say is that it is okay to enter less than the maximum number of lineups in any contest. And it looks like there's a $5 150 max tonight. So let's say you're playing this $5 150 max tonight, right? But you're not max entering it. Maybe you want to put in like 20 lineups. So what you're effectively doing is, or what you should be trying to do, right, is put in your best 20 lineups. And what you're not doing is you're not putting in your 21st through 150th best lineup. So all you're doing is you're taking 150 lineups and you're saying, hey, I'm just going to enter this subsection of my best possible lineups, because every lineup you enter after your first lineup should technically be a little worse than the one that came before it, right? You enter your best lineup first. Second lineup, still good, but it's a little bit worse, right? A little bit worse third, a little bit worse fourth, right? Or else you would have entered those sooner. So you don't have to do anything special when entering less than the maximum number of lineups. You know, I don't think about it any differently than entering, you know, than max. You can typically diversify better. You know, if you need 10 lineups out of a pool of 500, well, you're going to have more opportunity to diversify than if you need 150 out of a pool of 500, right? So that's something that can happen, right? You can get to a higher number of min uniques without having such a big impact on your set of lineups. But this is something I'll do all the time, right? Like earlier this NFL season, I came in second in the early only flagship for NFL for 20,000, and I only had 10 entries in that contest, and that contest allowed 150. So that is something that I think that you should do. You know, you should scale as your bankroll grows, right? Like, hey, you start out entering, you know, 3 lineups, and then you enter 5, and then you enter 10, and then you enter 20 as it makes sense, right? 50, 75, all of a sudden, you know, eventually, hopefully you're maxing out the contest, but you need to do that as you scale up, and you shouldn't be overextending to enter more lineups. Just enter what makes sense, and hopefully, you know, you can have a good day with just that small subset and go from there. All right, next question. Claxton was projected for 30 minutes, but he only played 20 something. Is there a reason for that besides him getting into foul trouble, and how does SaberSim account for coaching rotations. Yeah, I mean, yesterday, Brooklyn was super high value. They had so many players out. If we just go to Brooklyn and look at their team here, right? So we go to yesterday's slate. I'm just going to open up a new build. We filter for Brooklyn. And then look, you just come down here and you see all these names out, right? Ben Simmons, regular player. Cam Johnson, starter. Zaire Williams, regular player. Noah Clowney, Dorian Finney-Smith, starter. Cam Thomas, starter. Like they had, one, two, at least like three regular starters out. Ben Simmons kind of goes back and forth. Zaire Williams will get spot starts when some of these other guys are out. Noah Clowney plays off the bench regularly. They just had so many players out on yesterday's slate that it did make sense that, guys like Schroeder would play more, 37-minute projection. Claxton would play more. And then, you have a bunch of spot starters, right? Like, look at all these guys' salaries, 3,500 starting, 4,700 starting, 3,800 starting. We see super high value for 4,400 off the bench, right? And ultimately what ended up happening was Brooklyn lost the game by like 28 points. And even some of these guys sat late, right? So it's a really high variance situation, but there was just a ton of usage and opportunity for these players yesterday. And unfortunately, they didn't really get there, right? I mean, who got there? Dariq Whitehead, Shake Milton, and Tyrese Martin looks like he did well enough. He at least exceeded his projection here, right? But it made a lot of sense to me why these guys were projected where they were, and unfortunately they got blown out, and they just did not play very well overall. All right, Easy said, cool, thank you. Dante followed up saying, when I make changes in direct fill to my exposures, they come out differently from autofill. Why is that? Good question here. So the big difference between these two, we'll go back to today. Go to the main slate, go to this build where we built some lineups. So there's a big difference here between direct fill and autofill. In direct fill, you see your exposures before the lineups go into your contests. That's the way this works. What happens in autofill is different. What happens in autofill is you have to save the lineups and then the exposures populate. And the reason for that is because direct fill treats all of your contests as a whole, but autofill treats your contests on a contest by contest basis. So if I had a group of 5 contests right now, and I was using, 3 min uniques or something like that, it would be applying the 3 uniques across all 5 contests. But in autofill, what it's going to do is it's going to treat it on a contest by contest level in the order that the contests are listed. And then the other thing that comes into play is, am I using unique rank or am I using rank, right? And the difference here is that, okay, if I'm using unique rank, well, once contest 1 gets filled, those lineups get removed, and then now I need new lineups to fill out contest 2, and then we need to apply the uniques, and we need to apply any exposures you've set. We need to apply any filters you've set, right? Filters also work on a contest by contest basis. If you have a filter that says ROI greater than 0, we apply that individually as we go down the list in autofill. In direct fill, what happens is we take an average ROI across all of the contest sims that we have results for that you ran, and then we average that out, right? So direct fill and autofill work differently in that way, where autofill you have to save the exposures and then view them. Direct fill, you get to see them before the lineups go into the contest. If you're looking for a further breakdown in our help docs, we have this video here in SaberSim tutorials, autofill versus direct fill and fill methods, which I will drop in the YouTube chat here, that goes into that in more detail. But that's what's going on there. All right. Sean said, thank you. You're welcome. And taking a peek here in the Discord. Looks like we're all caught up there. caught up in the YouTube chat. Cool. So we're all caught up here. Appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, I will be back here tomorrow, Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern for our next office hours show. So until then, everybody, take care. Good luck. Thanks. Bye.